I remember when I was very young, uh, my aunt had a little, she had a piano in her house and, you weren't allowed to touch it. And I remember when nobody was around, I must have been 4 or 5 years old. I went up and I hit a note and I noticed that to the right, the pitches go higher and to the left, they go lower. And right at that moment, I had a full on epiphany. And two things occurred to me instantly. One of them was, oh, I get it. This is how music is made. I could see what I could kind of see music when I would imagine it or hear it. And I say, oh, okay, these are the notes. These are higher. These are on the staff. These are notes are that they're playing. These are notes they're playing. And I don't know what these little black dots are, but I think that's the secret language I need to understand. And also at that moment, I realized that the creation of music is infinite. And if I knew that language, I just instinctually knew at that moment, um, this is for you. That this is for you. It seemed organic. It felt authentic. It was clear. It's almost as if I understood music in that moment. Of course, I didn't understand. I had to learn the language, but I seem to have gotten it. And I thought everybody, uh, when they realized that, they'd have that realization. It wasn't until later, obviously, that I found out that musicians, people that are musically inclined, make that connection. So I became completely fascinated with the idea of composing. And I remember on my sixth birthday, my mom got me a little spinet organ, and I just pounded out melodies all day. The first thing I ever played, the first melody I ever played was the theme from this movie with Betty Davis called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte.
Okay.
Like a lullaby, but it's really the movie creeped me out beyond. It was the scariest. I loved it, but it was scary. So that melody was very haunting, and I would just play it. But anything I heard, I would try to play. And then when you go to school, at least when I went to school, they had music classes, and you'd get this little coronet, toot, 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 and you get a little music book. And that's when I remember, okay, yeah, okay, that's what this note is. All right. So I just started doodling and writing notes. And I was like, 6, 7, 8. And then when I started playing like all good Italian boys from Long Island at
Yeah,
9 years
yeah.
old, I started playing the accordion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was great because I learned bass clef. I really
Okay.
learned how to read. I understood more. So then I started writing music. I actually started writing. The guitar still wasn't in the picture. The guitar was a quiet fantasy
Yeah, yeah.
because right around that time when I was like 7 or 8, I saw some kid playing the guitar in my high school, and that lit me up too. That was another aha moment where I went, okay, I get it. That's for me. That's what I want. But I didn't have the courage or the wherewithal to find a guitar and start playing. But I was very interested in the composition stuff. So
You would have been about maybe 8 when you started to write music?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
probably just melodies, and little chords and stuff. But it wasn't until when I was 11 and 12, those were pretty big years for me because first I heard Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that was my impetus to start playing the guitar. But the guitar was always rock and roll, bluesy, kind of, it I didn't connect the notes on the guitar. I knew that the notes were there and I could actually read certain things by going, oh, that's a B. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, so then something pretty miraculous happened for me. Uh, there was this brilliant music teacher in my high school named Bill Westcott. And Bill was kind of a savant. He was a Juilliard graduate. and he was the teacher, the music teacher in this school. And he had this music theory. My school was so rich with music programs. There was band, there was orchestra, there was like three choirs, there was
Okay.
a big band, there was little ensembles. I mean, it was
Okay.
amazing. There was all these great, and then there was this intense music theory class that was reserved for 12th graders.
Okay.
It was very intense. Bill Westcott. So I was in seventh grade. I had just gotten into junior high, and I couldn't take the class because I was too young. Uh, but then the high school band needed a tuba player, and I made a deal. I said, I'll tell. They asked me if I would take up the tuba because they needed it, and I said, well, I'll take up the tuba if you let me take this music theory class. So all through high school, I played the tuba in the orchestra, but I took this intensive theory class every day for 6 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, 6 years. And that's where I learned everything. Bill taught me everything,
Okay.
the modes, music theory, how to write. Every day, my assignment was to write a piece of music that then he would play on the piano. And I'm not talking like, chord symbols and a melody. I had to write something that he would sight read.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's nothing more educational to a composer than hearing what you're writing, and Bill would play it, he'd sight read it, and then he'd say, okay, well, this is what it sounds like in retrograde, and he'd read it backwards, and this is
Okay.
inversion, and he'd read it upside down, and this is canonized with, moving fifths or something. So this was unbelievable education. And by the time I started taking lessons with Satriani on the guitar, I was learning all this stuff from Bill. Joe had learned it because he took Bill's class. But Joe was applying it to the real estate of the guitar. And he was showing me then, he's like, well, you might know these modes, but here's how they are on the guitar. And I'm like, so Joe really helped me connect all the music theory with the actual how it applies to the guitar. So that served me really well through high school. And then when I went to Berkeley, the majority of so while I was in high school also, I think I was about 16, I had written my first orchestra score. It was a piece for the high school orchestra. It was an abysmal disaster, but I did it.
As
I still have
happens
a scar
sometimes.
on my finger from the writing. Yeah. But then all through high school, I mean, yeah, all through high school, I was composing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I discovered Frank Zappa. And the thing that was so great for me with Zappa was I love the guitar. I mean, nobody was doing all the things that I enjoyed, like composition, humor, crazy guitar playing, rock and roll, blues, classical. Frank was doing it all, and so I was immediately attracted to his music. And his compositional prowess was vast. He would write things for all sorts of ensembles, all sorts of symphonic pieces, orchestral pieces. But one of the things that Frank was exceptionally effective at was composing for rock band, because a lot of the pieces he would come in and hand you the music, and it was all, every note was written out.
Okay.
Not all the time. Frank used any means necessary. So I love that idea. So I started just composing and writing all sorts of stuff through the years. And of course, I had great aspirations to have my music performed by an orchestra, but I couldn't see in my mind how to negotiate that because it's a very tight community. It's very expensive. And I didn't have any footing. I was a rock guitar player, and that's one of the One of the things they don't take very seriously is a rock guitar player composer.
Yeah.
So that was a little sort of through those years, I would just compose and write and write and write and write and just build up tons and tons of scores and parts in my attic. But eventually, another kind of miracle happened. I met a guy, Coda Clue, who was an artistic director at NPR in Holland, and also a friend of Frank's. And Frank introduced me to him back in the 80s. Co was the first one to import flexible into Europe.
Okay.
And then we struck a friendship. And then back in the like mid 90s, I was having a conversation with Co. And he said, well, what would you really like to do? And I said, well, my dream is to compose music for orchestras. I do it, but I don't have anybody to play it. And he said, I think you're a good guitar player, but I think you're a great composer. So he had faith in the kind of thing I was doing. So he basically pulled together and produced my first real orchestral shows in Holland with the Metropole. Started back in 2000s. And the project was called Sound Theories. First, it was called The Aching Hunger. And over a period of about 2 years, 3 years, I did 5 concerts with the Metropole, and we filmed and recorded. And then I ended up releasing those under the Sound Theories title. So that's the moniker I use for all my orchestral releases. And I write various kinds of orchestral music for that concert and also beyond. Usually, one type of orchestrations I do is on existing rock songs of mine that I just orchestrate. That's not very uncommon. And then there's pieces that I compose for orchestra and small rock ensemble, and I don't play in those. And then there's pure orchestral pieces. So once the Metropole concerts happened, it opened up the floodgates, and I was getting these offers from various orchestras around the world. And the first commission I took was from the NNO, the North Netherlands Orchestra in Holland. And we did a series of concerts that was very successful. And I had composed a tremendous amount of music. So I had all these compositions, and they were all performed and recorded, but I was never really happy with the recordings. So I felt one day I have to record these properly in the studio. So I had about 4 hours of orchestral music. And in 22, I went to Holland for 3 weeks and recorded the Metropole Orchestra in the studio. And then shortly after that, I went to Tampere, Finland, and recorded the Tampere Philharmonic on the larger pieces for about 2 weeks. So right now, I've got about 4 hours of orchestral music sitting on my shelf that needs to be worked on and eventually released. So